So in this segment, we're going to be kind of walking to our doom, I guess, discussing the meanest person on Twitter, kind of left Twitter, super Tansky, super edgy, an edge lady. I wouldn't call her an edge lord, an edge lady. And we're going to be walking to our doom here, trying to debunk some of the claims she makes there, and decides to throw, like, I wouldn't have done this video, but she decided to throw personal attacks at people. So I'm like, all right, bet, you kind of do deserve a video at this point. So let's have a listen to what she's whispering about, because her video audio is very quiet.
And the kind of attitudes that people had towards Labour when they tried to change tack and move more towards...
She's talking about the 90s under Tony Blair.
I guess the centre with New Labour. Now, the centre ground is not the space that I inhabit, actually. If I had it my way, I'd overthrow capitalism. Contrary to the...
And I kind of doubt that, you'd have to be extremely left-wing to want to overthrow capitalism. Even I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to overthrow capitalism. I just want, kind of Scandinavian model kind of reforms. So off to a bizarre start here, trying to say, well, I'm actually more to the left than a lot of these people, or as left as these people. So you can't criticise me for not being left enough, because I want to overthrow the system.
Of incels that, are slouched in their mum's spare rooms with pot noodles strewn down their fronts.
And it's just a weird...
Leaking nudes on 4chan, trying to tell me that I'm a centrist, because I don't do or say precisely what they want.
It's just a really weird insult to say, like, these are people who live in their mum's basement with pot noodles strewn down them. Like, this is like a James O'Brien kind of critique of people, like, oh, you're a loser who lives in your mum's basement, who's an incel. So she's saying these people hate women because they can't, they've got no riz. Just calling them a bunch of losers, when, like, some of these people do have substantive critique of the Labour Party. To some of these people might give her abuse, and obviously don't give her abuse, don't give anyone abuse on Twitter. Like, I try and refrain from some level of personal attacks, especially towards other media people, as much as she kind of can't seem to do that. But I would love to see her mention specifically who are these incels. Can you name any without going into libel territory, defamation territory? Can you tell us who are these people specifically on Twitter that throw these insults at you, that are these incels? Because from what I've seen of the criticism that you get there from either no face profiles, which I don't know how you can assume they're incels, and also normal looking human beings, including some women. So are those women incels as well?
Me too. Soft boys are gonna soft boy, aren't they? I digress.
And she's kind of focusing on the criticism she gets from males, when there are also a lot of women criticising her as well. So I genuinely don't get that.
Historically, most parties, the most successful parties, have won elections from the centre. Because
that's not really that true. If you look at what Boris Johnson won a stonking majority off a right-wing populist campaign. Theresa May kind of tried it a bit, talking about the burning injustices and leading into the Brexit means Brexit nonsense. You can argue David Cameron in 2015, Theresa May lost, to be fair. David Cameron in 2015 ran a kind of centrist campaign and won. That I'll give you. He tried that in 2015 and he didn't get a majority. He had a coalition government. So running to the centre and winning elections isn't true. If you want to argue Tony Blair was centre-left, then that's fine. But I think Thatcher was probably what we would define more as a right-wing populist, potentially. Someone who would throw kind of some kind of working class policies, or what policies that would appeal to working class people. That'd probably be the better way to frame it, in what she did. But again, I don't know a ton about Thatcher, so I'll probably take the L on that one. If the argument is Thatcher ran to the centre, even though she talked about wet Tories, so I don't know what kind of point she would make there. So these points really don't make much sense.
That's an area that kind of has policies that appeal to enough people, is enough of a compromise for people to get on board with.
Again, are we forgetting about Boris Johnson? The guy who just won the stonking majority by running a right-wing populist campaign?
So, in terms of vote share, if we weren't under a deeply unequal and undemocratic voting system like first past the post, progressive parties would get elected, because
it's always a dangerous argument, in my opinion, to use the argument of, progressive parties would win if we had a PR system. You don't know exactly how people would vote, unless you said if we had a PR system. Like, it's always a hypothetical argument, this one. And she criticises people for hypotheticals later on, so it's a bit silly.
The biggest sections in terms of vote share are progressive parties and people that don't vote. That's why we need to vote tactically in the next general election to yeet the Tories directly off a fucking
I don't know why she's mentioning non-voters, because you don't know how non-voters would typically vote.
Yeah. And then we go through the channel.
There's the edginess, no. Throw the Tories off the pier, is that what she said there? Yeet them, there we go.
General election to yeet the Tories directly off a fucking pier.
Yeah, there's the edginess, you know, the swearing, throw them off, yeet them off the pier, you know, yeet, using a word, you know, kids would use, down with the kids. So, you know, edge lady here.
And then we go through the channels to lobby, put pressure on Labour to give us what we want, which is
here we go,
a representative voting system in which all of our votes count equally.
I don't think a voting, well, you know, proportional representation, it depends what kind of PR system you go for. Like, you know, yeah, even the PR systems we have in Britain, in kind of Northern Ireland and Scotland, were designed to keep out majorities. So, you know, it depends what kind of form of PR you go for to say all votes will count equal. Probably wouldn't. You'd have to use a very weird system of PR to do that. I don't think most of the PR systems would do that. But anyways, how are you going to pressure Labour? That's what I want to hear. You know, how are you going to pressure them? What exactly are you going to do to pressure Labour after they've won the election? Because they're not going to listen to you. They've already tried. The members of the party have already tried to get a PR system. They voted consistently for a PR system, and the leadership said no. And that's them out of power. You're in a situation where Labour are looking to water down again, potentially, their promises on green policies. How are you going to pressure them to give you the policies that you want? I don't know if you want more green investment, but if you did, or if there were other policies you wanted and Labour are backed out of, how are you going to pressure them exactly? Because once again, we have it in fact that the leadership do not back a proportional representation system. So what are you going to do to pressure them? Because it sounds like your source on this, you know, the evidence for this, is Senator Armstrong.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Form of PR, if you will. Anyway, back to the documentary. Now, as much as I really respected John Smith as a politician party, that we would have won into a party that could show a broad section of society beyond just the left that it could run the country properly, it could be trusted. And it was a long, hard slog for Labour to achieve that. Now, if you look at the situation we're in now,
I mean, to be fair, didn't a lot of people think Kinnock would win the 92 election and were surprised that John Major managed to win it? Wasn't there a lot of shock at that? You know, Kinnock apparently taking his eye off the ball there, but again, I wasn't around back then. So if I take an L, I'll take an L on it. But from what I've heard and from what I've read, a lot of people were very surprised the Tories won in 1992. And considering how bad John Major ran it, you know, someone beating him wasn't that big a surprise. I think maybe the size of the majority was, but given how long the Tories ran the country for and did not do a good job, when you had scandal after scandal in Cash for Questions, amongst other things, it's not that big a surprise. I think that Labour won in 97. Maybe I'm rewriting history a bit here, I don't know. You know, let me know in the comments on that one, but I don't think it's that big a surprise given the constant problems, the fact that, you know, John Major himself was embroiled in scandals with his affair, I think, with Edwina Currie. You know, he was not, like, he did not give you confidence.
Not saying that this version of Labour is particularly bold or progressive. I would prefer it to be more so. But it's a change.
I mean, they're pretty trash. Like, they're not very good when it comes to policies, and we'll discuss that in a few minutes.
From what it was, which wasn't working. The previous leader of the opposition had 2 shots at it. It didn't work. If you look at...
And when we look at kind of the centrist policies, they also had 2 shots at it with Ed Miliband and Gordon Brown in 2010. So you could argue they had 2 shots and missed. Like, you can use the exact same argument. Corbyn lost worse in 2019, but he wasn't dealing with a centrist. And I don't think any kind of centre-left person would have beaten that Boris Johnson campaign machine. It was a monster. It was a monster of a campaign.
Look at the 80s and the 90s, right? After Thatcher had already done what we all knew she was going to do and finished her tirade of pure evil, closing down the mines, Labour was still operating as a protest party. They were seen as the loony left. The Tory smears stuck, so they had to regroup. Now, the old brass didn't want to regroup. Blair and Brown, they did, even though Brown was a little...
Her kind of argument here is, you know, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair managed to change tack and really, you know, managed to push the Labour Party in a different direction. But the difference is, at least, you know, I think Tony Blair was offering some policies that would help people, which Labour aren't really doing a massive lot of. And also the fact that Tony Blair exuded confidence, exuded charisma. When you look at Keir Starmer, which we'll look at the polls in a minute, he doesn't exude that. He fumbles in a lot of the things he does. And the only reason they've got that polling lead, which you'll mention, is, I think, because the Tories have botched this so badly.
That we're operating under, they've done a pretty good job to turn it around in the time frame that they have. Not saying that I on any level agree with every decision that's made by the leadership of Labour, far from it. Saying
why would you not?
they've not done a...
Why would you not list your problems with that? Here, I'll do it. They've botched their response to Gaza. They've gotten rid of basically a lot of the shadow front benchers. I've not seen a situation where you've had over 10 resign in the space of over a week. I would say they've done a bad job there. They should have given it to a free vote, and at least that way you could have kept some of the talent you have on the shadow front bench. I don't think there's a ton of it, but now you've got even less talent. Would you argue that a guy who the majority of people think are not doing a good job as leader, as we wait for things to load up? Fair enough, it's from the 6th of November. This before any of the Gaza stuff even happened. This is, this would have been as kind of the stuff in between Israel and Hamas has been kicking off, I think. Most people don't think he's doing a good job as Labour leader, and that's not even in power. When you look at his favourability ratings, he's disliked by 45% of the people polled. He's liked by 22%. If we look at Rishi Sunak's levels, he's liked by 18%, disliked by 58%. So he's not doing that much better in the favourability department. And he's got a lot more neutrals, I think. So those are people he can win over. But given the fact that he's terrible in interviews, terrible at comms, like this whole situation where Nick Ferrari asked him about cutting off food, cutting off water, and he said, I think Israel does have that right, but it's got to be done in accordance with international law. And the massive outrage that happened because that statement was so brain dead, it took them 11 days to clarify it. Would you say that was a good job when you had multiple contradictory statements from Labour regarding getting rid of the anti-protest bills? Would you say that was a good job? Honestly?
A bad job to remain for the best part of a year, way beyond the Tories in the polls. Obviously, it helps that the Tories are going fully batshit, evidently.
I mean, we live in a country, a two-party system, where people think it's either going to be Labour or the Tories. So I think they would look at the polls as, and this is an assumption on my part, as, oh, well, probably got to vote for one of them, depending on what constituency you're in for the most part. So they're going to switch from one to the other, unless, they're very right-wing and they go for reform, or kind of centre-left and say maybe the Lib Dems, or very left-wing and say the Greens, for example. But most people, I think, would say, I'd probably vote Labour, right? So this argument of, well, it's helped the Tories have gone crazy, but Labour have done such a great job, is like, based on what? Dude's not popular. He's not popular at all. So people don't think he's doing a good job as leader. So what are you basing his leadership credentials on? I mean, when you look at the statements he's made regarding the situation in Gaza, what fills you with confidence there when 1 week he's saying, I don't back the calls for a ceasefire, and then you got Darren Jones MP saying Labour have never not called for a ceasefire, which is a double negative. So again, I'm seriously asking here, what has Starmer done to earn this polling lead? Because I'm not seeing much here. Fair enough if you earn it, if you had a semi-competent Tory government, but you have a situation where they're just fighting with each other. That's what we're seeing here. Sunak is not right-wing enough for some of the MPs, and he's not One Nation Tory enough for some of the other MPs. The argument she's making here is just irrational to say Labour have this polling lead because of some achievement that Keir Starmer or anyone on the front bench has had. I'm not seeing it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm blind to this. I'll take an L. I'll happily take it if I am wrong, but from the looks of things, based on the polling data on Starmer, he's not that popular. Most people don't think he's doing a great job as leader of the opposition. So where's your evidence to say that Starmer is doing a great job here?
We have to be practical, and we have to take into consideration that the way that you win an election is by appealing to people beyond your own people. Preaching.
I mean, that is true. That's why Boris Johnson was so successful, because he went beyond the Tory heartlands. He went directly kind of to Labour voters and said, take a gamble on me. You don't like this geezer, take a gamble on me. And they did that. Will they do it again? Probably not. But Boris Johnson did that, but he didn't do that by running to the centre. That's the point here.
To the of society in order to get that ball over the line. Sometimes Labour's got that balance right. Sometimes they've got it wrong. But they're in opposition, facing up against a government that have created a post-truth state, that have run the country.
I mean, to be fair, with the argument of the government creating a post-truth state, I mean, according to people like David Dimbleby, that was Tony Blair during the Iraq War invasion that created kind of a post-truth state to an extent. I'm putting words in his mouth there, but that's where I think he points to the major fault lines in people trusting the the government. So I would argue it wasn't really the Tories that really started this off. Politicians, for the most part, have been doing this for decades. But I would definitely argue the Iraq War was a fundamental break in trust with the population and the government.
Into the ground, wasting hundreds of millions of pounds of our money.
Again, this is true. The Tories are trash. We know this.
That is using the Trump playbook and trying to incite riots on Remembrance Day. And the same people opposing Labour now are the same people that opposed Labour back when they tried to change last time.
I mean, that's not really true because I wasn't alive back then, so no. And I don't think some of the people posting about stuff were alive or, old enough back then to oppose Labour back then. So this argument doesn't really make sense.
I would rather fight for pie-in-the-sky hypothesis and unachievable aims than what is practically and logically achievable. If we fail...
That's 2x. That's cap. I'll tell you what, that's all lies, because we've seen Keynesian economics work. You can borrow money to invest it in the economy, which is what we want. For Labour to go back on this promise around green investment is just stupid, because that will pay dividends into the future of this country. There's a reason why Joe Biden is doing that in America, investing massively in green energy. There's a reason why the EU are also doing that. There's a reason why China is also doing that. The UK is kind of an outlier in that regard, not looking at investing in green energy, despite us being a big economy. So, this argument of, it's only hypothetical, is no, we know Keynesian economics works. We've seen it work live and in person. So, fundamentally, her arguments don't make sense. You can nationalise utilities and make them work properly. It works in other countries. Our systems, our railway system is trash. Our water systems are trash. Why? Because of this weird private system that we use. So this argument of, these are hypothetical, they won't work, is just silly. And that's what I think some of the people that argue against her want, is nationalisation of utilities. So her arguments, again, just don't make sense. And I think she's strawmanning a lot, using personal insults. Like, it's very easy to use personal insults against your detractors. But, in terms of substantive political disagreement, I think I've given that, because what you're giving Labour is everything. Why would they give you a PR system when they don't benefit from PR? You can win less than 50% of the vote share. You can win, say, 40% of the vote share, or say 45%, and you can have a stonking majority, huge majority. You can win 50% or 49% under a proportional representation system, and you have less than a majority. You're forced into a coalition. That is the reason why Labour don't want a PR system, because you can have all of the power some of the time, but under a coalition, some of the time, but under a coalition government, you'd have some of the power all of the time. And they don't want that. They want that kind of absolute power. If it was the case you could pressure Labour into giving us a PR referendum, that would have happened under Tony Blair, because Tony Blair had promised some sort of consultation or a referendum on it, I think, back in 10 years, when they've reformed their image, the media comes back on their side, the business comes back on their side, etc. Like, I cannot see a world where Labour do back PR, but also I can see a world where the Tories come back. So for her to say, my biggest thing is PR, proportional representation, it's just not going to happen unless there's a hung parliament. The only time we had a referendum on the voting system wasn't because of Tony Blair, it was because of David Cameron, because the Lib Dems forced it as a major concession. That was the only time we had it, because of force. This idea we can pressure Labour. You can't even pressure Labour now. You can't pressure Labour now to commit to a proportional representation. Forget a referendum, a consultation. You can't even get that out of Labour. So for you to argue, you're going to put them in power and pressure them, nah. If they win a stonking majority, they ain't going to listen to you. They're going to be like, super who? Super who? Nah, never heard of you.
To use the systems that we have in place to our advantage, we're going to get another term of BNP. We're going to get the Farage Tories. Do you think they're going to get any better? The thing that enrages me the most about
this is true, but again, it's not the people that fail politicians. It's most of the time it's the politicians that fail people. And so to make the argument, to vote shame people here doesn't make any sense. It's up to Labour, like you said, to appeal to people. So if Labour aren't appealing to left-wing voters, it's not the left-wing voters' fault who want to vote for Green, who don't like this iteration of Labour. That's not their fault, that's Labour's fault. So you cannot argue that Labour need to appeal more to people outside of their base, to other people in the country, and then say, also, you left-wing voters, you've got to vote Labour or else. It doesn't fundamentally make sense. Her argument breaks apart, because you cannot, on the one hand, vote shame people, but also, on the other hand, say, we have to change policy to appeal to these people. You cannot do both.
This is all based on hypothesis. People, but Star was going to be worse, he's going to be Tory, blah, blah, blah. What? Not one policy from Labour is remotely conservative.
Okay, and once again, she fails to understand that politics isn't about what you do, it's about what you don't do. So Labour aren't going to make reforms to capital gains tax. The bare minimum they could do is at least put capital gains tax as the same as income tax. That's the bare minimum they can do. I would have it higher because your money makes money. You're not doing anything, so there's no work involved there. You just sit on you sit and your investments make money. So I would have capital gains higher than income tax. But it's like I said, politics isn't about what you do; it's about what you don't do. And Labour aren't making certain reforms that they could easily make. So this whole point again doesn't make sense, and you don't know what Labour are going to do on a lot of things. Apart from nationalising the trains, we don't know what else Labour are actually going to do. We genuinely don't. We know some of the things they're not going to do, like nationalise utilities, etc. But without an actual manifesto, we don't know. And so here she is speculating. She's the one offering hypotheticals.
People react and don't think. And do you know...
That's you. That's what you do. You react and don't think. That's your whole thing.
What you're doing when you do that, you're helping the very people that are ruining your fucking life. Tories sit there and go, oh, brilliant, like they're kicking off at each other again. Meanwhile, we're like, legging it out the door with bags of swag, And also, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater because there's like massively progressive MPs in Labour, like, Clive Lewis. If we don't win this election...
Like Clive Lewis, names 1. About Dr. Khan, 2. Angela Rayner, potentially 3. As we got loads of progressive MPs like Clive Lewis. Awkward pause. What's up with that? Like, you can tell there's a jump cut there. Probably didn't run out of people to say.
We are fucked. You do realise that, don't you? Naysayers in the comment sections saying, oh, I'm going to vote Green. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? Let's vote for the person that's got no fucking hope of return.
I mean, you push tactical voting, and yet voting Green in a place like Brighton, I think they have the best chance of winning. So you can't say, oh yeah, vote Green, you loser, and then say tactical vote, because what if the Greens actually do have the best chance of winning in a certain seat? Like, fair enough, that's a rare example. It's Brighton. That's one constituency in the country. But again, her argument it doesn't make sense. And voter shaming people, really? Because again, politicians are the ones that fail people. It's not people that fail the politicians. If that was the case, then I would have been real mad at people when Ed Miliband lost. But we have to accept that the dude couldn't eat a sandwich properly and he took an L. So I just don't understand the whole gimmick. Like, if your whole thing is you're trying to help that's a really scary still image, by the way. If your whole thing is you're trying to help the Labour Party, right? How does voter shaming and swearing and insulting people who could vote for Labour, how does that help? Maybe you think these people are too far gone. Like, no matter what happens, they'll vote Green. But if your whole thing is you are a part of Labour Social, or you feature on Labour Social, whose whole goal is to help Labour into power, how does shaming people and demeaning them and swearing at them and saying you're a bunch of losers, how does that help Labour? I don't get it. That is not how you build a winning coalition. Is that what Tony Blair did? He said, oh yeah, go vote Green, you losers. No, he didn't do that. He didn't even kick some of the radical people out of the party. He never kicked people like Jeremy Corbyn out. Fair enough, this time around Corbyn did kind of deserve it because he walked into it. But he never kicked out, some of the more kind of left-wing elements of the party unless they, I think, deserved it. That's something I'd have to look into. But this whole thing is just a complete shambles. Honestly, personally insulting people, like, if you want to throw out personal insults and homonyms, I would be really careful about that, because people with glass houses should not throw stones, and you're throwing a lot of stones. But we'll see what I'd happily debate this kind of stuff with any kind of person who says we need to just get Labour into power and then pray that they do the right thing. Because how are you going to pressure them? Because all they're going to do is they're going to win and say, oh, what are you going to do? Not vote for us. If you don't vote for us, you're helping the Tories. All of the arguments you have used here, they all flip on you. They all flip on you with no shame. So what are you planning on doing here? Because you're not going to be able to pressure Labour. Not really. I genuinely don't get it. I'm just befuddled, absolutely befuddled. Because when we look at these polls, Starmer's not. People don't think he's doing a great job, and he's leader of opposition. When you look at the favourability, not doing that great, is he? Not doing that great. If we look at which ones, which politician actually top is, it's really weird that Rayner's actually doing quite well. I say that quite well. She's on 25, to be fair. It's slim pickings up here. But I just don't get it. Maybe I've rambled on a bit too much. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, don't harass people. Don't send hate towards Tansky or anyone like that. If you're going to send hate towards me, then fair. Maybe I deserve it. I don't know. But I think at this point, this video's gone long enough. So I'm going to say, I think we're smoking that Super Tansky pack. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.